Welcome back to Planning Reimagined. My name is Celeste Moya, and I'm joined with our advanced planning guru, Kris Stegall.
Hello.
So, today we are going to be talking about how proactive planning can really be beneficial, not just for our loved ones, which it always is, but mostly for those vulnerable ones that maybe can't always take care of themselves for different reasons. And this is the case even if our clients have substantial assets. So, today we're going to be sharing the story of Edward Whitmore. Just as a reminder, all of our stories are based on real clients. However, we always change the names. Edward is a retired executive whose greatest worry wasn't navigating his own retirement, but instead protecting his son's future. And we'll go into the details in a minute. So, as a reminder, all of our stories that we share here are part of our Story of the Week series. If you are not already receiving that email series, please, or not part of that list, please email us to hello@robinglen.com and we will get you added to that list. So, why don't we just get started, Kris? And if you want to share a little bit about Edward and what he was facing.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Celeste. Let's kick this off. So, yeah, our client's name, it was Edward. So, as you might mention, he's a lifelong car industry executive, super smart with money. He's done all the right things for literally decades. He's 78 now, and everything is pretty much set except for one thing that's keeping him up at night, and it's not the markets, and it's not even taxes, which I think a lot of our clients are probably focused on. In this case, it's really his son Daniel. So his son Daniel, he's on the spectrum. He's 35, happens to be thriving at a job that he loves at the local library, which is awesome. So he's pretty functional. He's super kind. He's bright. And again, he's doing a lot of stuff on his own. But the one thing that he's not that great at right now is really money management. And then boundaries are also a little bit difficult for Daniel. Now you add in Edward's ex-wife, Clara, who was obviously Daniel's mom. Clara has a pretty significant history, or she did, of some pretty messy money decisions, and then also applying emotional pressure, which kind of led to the divorce to begin with. But that's creating some real problems for Edward and how he's thinking about Daniel and his future. Add in the fact that Daniel's got a girlfriend as well, which again, that's awesome. But of course, Edward doesn't trust a girlfriend. So you can see that there's all these outside forces that are really keeping things difficult for Edward. And so his biggest fear is pretty simple. Assuming that Daniel outlives him, which he believes, he's 78, now Daniel's only 35. There's going to be some problems with protection and making sure that Daniel has everything he needs to live. Again, what Edward wasn't worried about was just a normal estate plan. What he was really focused on when he engaged us was finding a guardrail system that really let Daniel like live his life the way he wanted to,
Mhm.
but without putting the keys to that inheritance vault in his pocket. He really needed something to help set up and make sure that Daniel could protect himself from himself and some of those outside forces that maybe are coming after him.
Yeah, and we see that a lot, right? Where there's children who are, somewhat independent, but generally it's the whole financial management portion of it that they're not great at. Sometimes we've even seen this with drug addiction issues, right? Where the parents are trying to keep them independent and make sure they have their own life and give them as much autonomy as possible. But we know there's limits on how much they could do. And you're right, there's a big age difference, 78, 35. Daniel's life will, statistically be a lot longer. And so there's a lot to worry about between Edward's passing and Daniel's lifetime. As we were, kind of preparing for this, I was looking up some information on just statistics, and I was kind of blown away that about 20% of children in the US, so children is anybody that's under the age of 18, based on this study, which is about 14.5 million kids have some kind of disability. But
Wow.
only about 25% of parents have actually established any type of special needs trust or, have really done the planning around it. Now, I know sometimes economics comes into it, but even with clients like Edward who have a significant amount of assets, right, who would say, hey, the money's going to be there. It's not just about the money. It's about who's going to manage it. How are they going to manage it? How are they going to distribute it? Who can't touch it? How are you going to space it out for a lifetime of 40, 50, 60 years that will encompass not just living expenses? Because even though, yes, Daniel has his own job, we know what he earns doesn't cover all of his expenses and some of the medical things that he, or some of the kind of treatments that he goes through, some of the mental health things that he goes through as well. So all of that we have to play into. And Edward did have some kind of non-negotiables, as you mentioned. He wanted to make sure Daniel was taken care of medically. And medically means a lot of things because it's not just today. Daniel will be older one day, hopefully, and there's going to be a whole new. I know our last podcast was on long-term care. That comes into play here too because it's expensive, and you have to factor that in to the amount of assets that are going to be left to the child. So it wasn't just a super simple estate plan, as you mentioned. There's so much more that goes into thinking not just what my child needs today to live off of, but as prices evolve, as cost of living increases, as potentially medical expenses get higher, is this truly going to be sufficient to cover everything they need? But there was some planning that we were able to help them with, if you want to touch on it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just to kind of add on to that, I think it's an interesting balance that families are facing as well, because they're not only thinking about just the finances in and of themselves, but, in the case, and in particular this one, he really wanted Daniel to feel like he was independent. And so I think there's that sense of how can we create a plan that not only focuses on the finances and it locks things down and it does, what Edward wanted to do in this case, but how does it also sort of empower Daniel to live his life as well. I think that balance makes it an interesting challenge for families. So, um, yeah. So, like you said, most families don't create a plan that actually works when the parent is around. You just rattled off some statistics there, and oh my goodness, it's kind of scary when you sit back and think about it. Um, and just to go back and reiterate what Edward's non-negotiables were, which was what I guess a lot of families would be in this kind of a circumstance. So, just to reiterate, it's one, make sure Daniel's life funded for life, right? So, we don't want to have to force him to do anything by himself. We wanted to make sure that the finances were there for him. He wanted to make sure that Clara was completely out. So he has a significant distrust of the ex-wife. And it makes sense. If you knew more about the story, you would agree. You also want to lock out predatory partners and divorces from the setup as well, right? So he mentioned the girlfriend. Who knows where that's going to go? Maybe there's kids in the future. Maybe there's not. But Edward was already worried that she was kind of predatory already, right? So that, whether it's true or not, it's still in the back of his head. So if something became a non-negotiable, you cannot have, a future spouse have access to any of this stuff. And then this was kind of a cool bit as well, is that, if Daniel doesn't end up having kids, at the end of the day, what Edward wanted left, if there was anything left inside the trust, was for it to go to his alma mater, Michigan Tech. So these were all the types of things that were spinning in his head. How do I make sure that Daniel is good for life? And then if there's anything left, well, what happens then? So these were all things that we were able to help him out. So this is, again, we're just trying to build a safety net. So the first move and was to create a special needs trust. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious. I think anybody who's probably hearing this story went, "Oh, you should probably set up a special needs trust." Like, well, that's exactly what happened here. In this case, we set it up with a corporate trustee. We didn't want any family members kind of in and around because that can put them in some pretty difficult situations at time, but designating corporate trustee with these very clear rules really helps the situation out. We funded it with a $6 million life insurance policy when Edward passes, so we noted that the age was quite significant, and $6 million was probably more than enough for Edward to live on. I'm sorry, for Dana to live on. But he wanted that excess in there again. If he didn't need it all, it was going to go to his alma mater.
And a super quick note on the corporate trustee is that that also helps with the longevity issue, right? 'Cause sometimes perhaps you feel comfortable saying, well, my sister, maybe Daniel's aunt or somebody else could be the trustee, but you kind of face that same issue of outliving them. And so particularly when you have this type of younger individual who's the beneficiary, you want to make sure there's something in place there that regardless, there's always going to be somebody managing those assets in the way that has been dictated inside the language of the trust.
Yeah, that's right. Distributions are going to be for Daniel's benefit. It's going to be some kind of a schedule, and it's going to have that truly independent oversight again to help make sure that folks like Clara and the maybe future spouse can't actually get to it. And professional trustees. I mean, this is what they're really really good at doing, right? They don't have that same emotional issues that a family member might have whenever making these what could be rather difficult decisions down the road. And again, in this case, if there's anything left over, it gets to go to the alma mater, which again made everybody very happy there. So
Another thing
you're
sometimes
excited.
that we get asked about is how does the like special needs trust impact some of the other programs that they might be, eligible for, like Social Security or Medicaid. So that's also kind of a fine balance of things that need to be figured out. Once again, regardless of level of wealth, that's something that comes into play. So that's something that has to be incorporated into the planning. But having that trust in place just really allowed Edward to dictate, here's how I want the money to be distributed with some flexibility. And that's a really important thing for clients to remember, is that even though we want to control beyond the grave, we all want to do it because we all think we know better than our kids. It's important to know that you have to have some level of flexibility within the language. Give the trustee a little bit of autonomy in making decisions, because there might come a time where maybe it makes more sense to give a bigger down payment in a car, or they're buying a home, or there's an emergency expense. And at the end of the day, the trustee does have to go by what is in the trust language. But if have another important aspect is a letter of intent. We always tell clients, when you're building out a trust, what is the intent behind it? Leave those instructions, because if your intent is just for the money to be used wisely, but it says only give him $6,000 a month, then that's not really intent, right? That's just saying, here's what I think his expenses are going to be, and we're never going to move from that. But life happens, things change, cost of living goes up, emergencies happen, right? And so I think clients just have to be mindful of, yes, you can leave great instructions to protect, but you can also leave some flexibility so that the trustee can make good choices for that beneficiary. Um, One thing that also came into play here, and I'll give Edward all the credit in this situation, he mentioned long-term care. He was at a stage in his life where he was now starting to see, some bones that were a little more achy. He was having some health issues, a few more medications he was taking, and he was seeing what that cost of care looked like even for him. So he was a single individual. And really didn't have anybody else to care for him. So he said, if Daniel's in the same circumstance in the future and he doesn't have anyone to care for him, I think that's significantly going to deplete, what I'm leaving behind, even with this life insurance policy. And I will say, clients are, even incredibly wealthy clients are always scared they're going to run out of money, Kris, right? It doesn't matter. They can be billionaires, and that's always the case. But,
Yes.
we added a second layer of protection. So we added a hybrid long-term care policy, of which Daniel is also the insured, to supplement what was being left behind, just to protect his, financial well-being. So now we were not only able to, protect those assets, make sure they really do last throughout his lifetime, but give them this completely separate pool of money that could just be used for care. But once again, anything left over, there's a death benefit component, would be paid out to an alma mater, to Michigan Tech, because that's what, where Edward's heart was, besides, of course, his son. So nothing was going to waste. Everything was going to either be used by Daniel, protect Daniel's assets, or go to something that meant something to Edward. So it was Edward's idea. And ever since then, this is something I definitely mention to clients, when they have some kind of special needs situation. And of course, the insured is insurable. That's important when it comes to that type of policy. But it just added another layer of asset protection that he wouldn't have had. And the last thing I'll note is we also engaged a professional care manager who will be there throughout it's a company, and they have these individuals who actually build out plans of care, ensure that every aspect of Daniel's lifestyle is essentially managed, to ensure that if Edward's not there, all of that continues. He's going to his doctor's appointments, he's taking care of himself, because that's the non-financial aspect of it that we don't think about. It's not just about being able to pay the bill, is if are they actually doing the things that they need to do if there isn't somebody there to guide them. So there's great organizations out there who have these services, and you can engage for a very reasonable cost to continue to provide that hand holding, essentially, that they're going to need going forward. But then we did some additional trust planning, if you want to touch on that, Kris. We get creative all the time.
Yeah, we really do, and this is all kind of an extension of the special needs trust. But the concept is it's pretty simple, but again, wildly powerful. So the idea is just make sure that there's an annual income that goes to Daniel, but it's also shielded from creditor. So again, those creditors could be creditors of himself, but they could also be, again, when I think about being shielded, those could also work for claims against, say, a future spouse if he has one, or if the ex-wife there, Clara, tries to, compel him to try to spend money on something that maybe he shouldn't be doing, right? That trustee in there really gets to help make those decisions and help make sure that those impulsive decisions or like impulsive wants from Edward or I'm sorry, from Daniel or the other people involved can't be made, right? So I think that when we're going through this process, I do think that Edward kind of said it best. Like at the end of the day, this wasn't about just piling up a bunch of money and setting it aside. It was really about giving Daniel the structure to live really, really well with dignity and all the safety measures that were needed to make sure that again, outside sources weren't compelling him to do things that he shouldn't do even when his dad, Daniel, isn't actually there anymore.
Yeah, and I should clarify that when I say we, give, trust or estate planning advice, it's all
Right.
just we're not attorneys, so high level guidance based on our experience of what other clients have done and through the engagement of our legal partners that we work with. So we have some internal, legal partners, and then we also have, who are more consultant, work more on a consultant basis. And then we have all of our legal partners that we work with and collaborate with externally and with our clients representation as well if they already have some. So just because we've been doing this for so long, we see this over and over. We have a idea of what should be done, but we always leave it up to the legal professionals to make those decisions. All of this was done in conjunction with Edward's financial advisor and with Edward's legal team as well, to make sure that everything not only gets implemented but actually gets executed one day and gets and that there's follow through on that, because that's another key component of planning that fails is that things get done, but then there's nobody there to actually complete the process, right? And so that's a really important part. So, today, key takeaway is just that if you have a vulnerable member in your family who, has maybe they are independent, but they have some financial they're not really financially savvy. They're not able to manage that for themselves. Or in some cases, we see special needs situations where there's going to be somebody that has to be 100% taken care of all the time. So there's a complete range of why this planning comes into be. But it's important to be proactive about it. It's not something that if you leave to, just see what happens, it's not going to end well. We've seen that over and over. You want to make sure you're proactive. It doesn't matter your level of wealth, whether you have a modest, home or you have a giant asset amount of assets, a huge net worth. It's important regardless to ensure they're taken care of. So start asking yourself the questions, what does that care look like? What do they need? What legal documents do I have? Have things been updated? Who do I want there to be making decisions for my loved one in the future if I can't? So if this is something that resonates with you, definitely reach out. We can, if it's something that we can assist with, we have a lot of partners in the industry that we can help connect you with to make sure you're speaking to the right professionals to help guide that planning. So that is it for today. So special needs planning, it's important. Do it. Be proactive about it. Don't delay. Don't procrastinate. That's the theme for today. In the next episode, we are going to be talking about a topic that sometimes may seem so boring, especially to us in the industry. We're like policy review. It's not a big deal. However, it is such a crucial part. By policy review, we mean all of the policies that you have. It doesn't matter what kind of insurance. So we'll be talking about policy review in our next episode. And so, Kris, I know we have some resources and some things that we might be linking in here.
Yeah, definitely. If you're listening, please make sure you access our show notes. We will have an additional resource in this one today. There's an abstract that was written by Michael L. Gans. It's an article he put together that basically said the lifetime per capita incremental societal cost of autism is 3.2 million. So that means that for every individual that needs this kind of support, it costs 3.2 million, and most of that is driven by lost productivity and then adult care, which is one of the main things that we were focused on today. So make sure you take some time to check that out.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one. Have a good one. See you soon.
See you.